right here is my engine from my Formula Drift E36, and it was the highest horsepower 2JZ in Formula Drift. Got me to multiple podiums, spun 8,500 RPM, all in a 3.4 liter 2JZ. I mentioned you guys wanting to dissect this engine, see how things wore, and see areas that we can improve or areas that were really good strong points of this engine package, and we're gonna do that. But before we do, I thought it'd be cool to share with you guys some of the things on this engine that are probably a little bit more simpler than you'd expect. In the world of professional drifting, it's pretty uncommon that we were able to run a front radiator and still keep it cool. The wiring harness that we use is actually a very simple and cost-effective harness from Wiring Specialties. We are in a stock intake manifold with only 6 1500cc D-Works injectors, and for that very unique sound, we ran an Artec cast exhaust manifold. And why I wanted to point this out is because a lot of people think you gotta throw the most expensive and most complicated things at an engine to make power and be reliable, but a lot of it comes down to how it's built, and we're gonna find out today areas that we can improve to make it even better. But this engine saw 33 pounds of boost. It's had over 500 pounds of nitrous run through it, 100 plus dyno pulls testing different turbos and engine things, and we took it out of the car still running with no issues, so we're gonna dive into it today. We do have a special guest joining us for the teardown. This is Jay from RS Garage. You may recognize his face. He's a legend in the 2J world. What, hundreds of 2Js you probably built at this point?
Quite a few at this point. Mostly in the drag racing space, so street cars and drag racing. So this is a bit different because these engines are doing a lot of work, but they're not doing a lot of high load, high effort work. They just have to survive and manage heat and manage a lot of RPM throughout the battles.
This will be interesting because maybe we'll have some back and forth because like we want to get you on board with helping us push our program to the next level, but drifting, I feel like there's a little bit of a misconception of like what we're asking of these engines. But I mean, this thing sees peak torque over and over and over again, and it's just sitting to the point where it won't even hit limiter because it's so loaded up.
Well, the worst thing I would argue would be the oiling.
Yeah.
These engines don't hold a lot of oil, and you have a lot of RPM, so the oil's just getting worked on. You know, if you watch how quickly oil goes from liquid to Frappuccino at high RPM, poor bearings.
Yeah, and I guess your average time on the drag strip would be like a few seconds, where our average lap in drifting is 20 seconds or so.
Yeah.
So
well, you see it out at Bonneville, even on a car with the cars with the 3 and 4 gallon oil tanks, they maintain oil pressure well. But the cars with like a 2 gallon tank, by mile 3, the oil pressure is like trailing.
Interesting.
Yeah, because the oil just could speed up.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, let's dig in.
All right.
I'm filling in for Mr. LZ to remind you guys that every $5 spent on LZMFG, Drift HQ, and Sim HQ gets you entered for a chance to win this Dandelion Yellow Evo 5. It's a great way to support the channel if you like the videos, and don't forget to hit that like button.
What's your favorite course? What is there a corner that when you arrive at a racetrack, you know there's this part of that racetrack that just gets you?
Oh, 100%.
What racetrack is that?
Ebisu, North Course. Like you're going like top of third gear, up a hill, you have a blind entry, many cars roll here, there's trees, there's a wall, and then a big backwards corner.
What kind of speeds?
Maybe like 90-ish. Nothing too crazy. There's definitely faster tracks, but like that's the course.
One?
Yeah.
Yeah. I was thinking about that on the way here because in drag racing, a really good pass, you can take pieces out of that pass. Mm-hmm. And you think about the problem with drag racing is over so fast.
Yeah.
Well, in your world, like you're on course in the zone for a number of minutes.
Yeah.
Which it's still just minutes, but it's got to be pretty awesome.
Yeah. Have you been in a drift car?
Matt Schulman took me for a spin.
What do you think?
The ride with Matt Schulman was pretty cool. I enjoyed that.
You want me to pull the other cover while you're doing that?
Sure.
So one thing we are expecting to find is premature bucket wear again. And is that just because the material of the cam is a little bit hard compared to the bucket material?
Talking about this subject gets a lot of people really worked up. In an OEM configuration, a steel cam is a roller cam and a chilled cast cam is a flat tappet cam. And it's not that the steel is terrible, it's just that the oil's not direct fed. So you have your splash lubricant. Even on some OEM engines, they have spray bars in the valve cover where they're showering oil down. You know, then you get into funny loads where the guy's hitting the rev limiter, he's on anti-lag, and there's like unnatural combustion events, and that's working against the valve train too. You know, this type of thing with these steel cams, I have an engine that went to Bonneville, half-mile stuff, quarter-mile stuff, and I had a DLC bucket. This is like back in 13, and the DLC was my fix. Some engines have rocker arms and lifters and push rods and a mess of parts. This is the simplest way to get the job done.
So is this like an aggressive setup?
This is if this is an S2, this is, as far as I'm concerned, the best it gets in this camshaft manufacturer.
It works really well with her if you use rotary examples. So this would be like, this wouldn't be a full peripheral port. This would be what, maybe like a partial peripheral port?
Semi-P? A semi-P.
Yeah, because you can go bigger than these, but for what we're asking of the engine, we wouldn't want a full P. Yeah, dude, I'm feeling like I want to just jump off a cliff, but like not like that, like just like for fun.
You're gonna have to travel a few hundred miles to find one of those.
Yeah, there's not a lot of
No,
cliffs
there's
in
a rock quarry. There's more than one rock quarry around here.
Really?
Yeah.
Where?
I'm gonna tell you. In the Palm Coasty area, there's rock quarries that you can throw things into.
Okay.
And then in the middle of the Florida, there's rock quarries.
All right.
Big holes in the earth.
Cool.
We could find a sinkhole.
Yeah.
You could do a mini version of that Alaskan car jump.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That'd be fun.
The Florida car jump.
Florida people would love that.
It's got some binding present between the timing belt,
It's
idler
rubbing.
bracket. It's rubbing the bolt.
Yeah.
The bolt is an aftermarket bolt, and it was designed around a factory piece of hardware. So that is rubbing on that.
A little bit of chafing going on.
Yeah. People use aftermarket bolts,
Yeah.
and the bolt could have a little bit taller head. Well, it's going to spin right out.
It's stuck.
No, it broke.
Yeah, I'm saying like the thingy's stuck.
Oh no.
Get a pick and see if you can whirly bird that thing out.
Where-
You
Maybe
already
it
set
was
me up
just,
to set me up to
fatigued.
fail on that.
Oh my god.
Is the bolt too long?
Maybe.
Well, that's going to be the difference, because if it's tight in that hole, you didn't feel it meet its maker. And if it's loose in the hole, the bolt was just old and tired.
Well, let's check the depth. Oh yeah, those aren't deep at all. It's maxed out.
An old BMW, an old Mercedes, an old Nissan, they all smell different, right? So when you crack a main bolt loose, like why does it smell different on different manufactured engines?
Yeah.
What are they doing there?
I mean, maybe it's based on like the amount of carbon the engine sucks in, like the EGR system, or
I mean, it's under the main bolt. It's down in there. It's like in the bowels of the block.
Taco Bell sink would just be like a
We're gonna find
I
out.
was,
McDonald's sink.
I was saying it smells good.
Yeah.
Well, this engine has clean oil, and you guys say you change the oil a lot.
Yeah, like once or twice a year. I'm just kidding. The look I just got.
Well, because like your
No.
oil is your first line of defense against engine failure. So if you're not changing the oil all the time and you're using an alcohol-based fuel, you can kill some parts. You know, whether it be valve train or bearings. So oil's cheap. So changing your oil a lot is, yeah, it's cheap.
I think pretty much every event we change oil. I'm actually really good at taking things apart with the engines. It's just the putting it back together thing that's hard. You know? Jay, what do you think about RB engines? You can be honest.
I am gonna be honest.
There's no feelings to hurt here.
There's no feelings to be hurt. If I had a little bit more money in my life, I'd be driving around in something with an RB in it. Right now I have an RB project.
Oh, okay.
So I don't think that RB is a 2J, but I don't think that it does anybody any service to talk poorly about either engine, because we're lucky to have both. But I do like the sound of the RB over the sound of the JZ.
Yeah.
I think the RB sounds really sexy. Little crank.
You heard it here first.
The Aussies, man, those guys get carried away on it though. Yeah, they'll figure out how to put 3.5 liters under an RB head and call it an RB, and like it's still an RB. Like, well, kind of.
Oh, you can see it.
Did the bucket that failed before, was it worked on the bottom? But when you pull the bucket out of the engine, out of the head, the side, the bore of the bucket, the part that's down in the cylinder head, was it also affected, or just the top? Yeah, this gasket goes here.
Sean?
Easy, don't make. It's gonna be using adult swear words. A paper one goes here. Now that's a good question. That is a man that's made a mistake before, and is skilled in deflection. That wasn't me. You're gonna be doing a time lapse. I missed that one. Where the shot keeps coming back to Adam taking the crank reflector off. He fought a good fight. 84.
Are you just basically like seeing what the torque of the
Yeah.
remaining is? I didn't know you can measure it backwards.
83. Yeah.
They're pretty good.
Yeah. That's why the OEMs have that tool with like 14 heads, and it just comes and puts the part on at one time. And then everything's tightened the same, 86. So the head studs that are in this engine are ARP's 625 material, which is a fairly new material to the market. And ARP makes hardware in a variety of materials. The cheaper stuff is 8740, but they only manufacture out of the top 2 grades. And then you get an L19. L19 is about as strong as custom-made 625, but it's susceptible to hydrogen embrittlement. So any amount of water or coolant, touching it with your fingertips can upset the fastener, and the fastener will basically explode. So you've had guys that have race engines in a trailer and they can hear a bolt break because the water digs at it. It's a really strange phenomenon, but custom-made 625 has zero corrosion concern. And in this size fastener, with a JZ, I've been 6s in the quarter mile on ethanol, which should have been using methanol, but this fastener is about all you need. This fastener will maintain head gasket integrity even after the block can't maintain head gasket integrity. It's a really neat fastener.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Adam, pulls a crank reluctor.
Yeah, well, you literally just split the entire long block.
You got this, babe.
You're doing great, sweetie.
Babe. So good. Yeah. Yeah.
So this head was done at Bill at Extreme. The guy's been at the game for a long time, and there's care taken. So they use a CNC machine to cut the cam relief for the bucket, and then if you look around all these holes, there's hand deburring, just getting all the casting flash off. And when you're doing a job like that, it doesn't add a lot of time, but you're showing care through your work. So these guys are craftsmen. It's pretty cool.
Fun fact, if you guys don't recognize that name, Bill's the same guy that did the heads on the Porsche. So 2JZ, oh, he beat me. Man. Okay, so Freddie put money on this head gasket already showing signs of failure. Was he right? Let's find out. It's looking pretty good to me so far. Just keep on maxing out my nuts. Ha! It's done. Why are you touching my buckets?
Guilty as charged. Guilty as charged. And I tell you one thing that really helps you guys out is you run these engines at a level they can be happy at. They're not overworked. It's not some 1600 horsepower.
I mean, that's because we don't have you building them.
Well,
You bet your ass we're going to work the next one a little harder.
what are you gonna do for turbo response?
No, we don't need that much power. We need
Sean said no.
reliability.
I'll take what I can get. If I can have both, why not?
What's the most
You
powerful
can't
car
keep
on
it
the circuit?
What do you think's the most horsepower on grid? 1400 horsepower? I don't know that they run it at that.
I know Jerry Yang is at like 1300 and RTR is around there.
You see the scratches inside of the pan? That's when I board slid in St. Louis.
Oh, this dent
In
right
drifting,
here
that's
is not,
it's not a good thing.
what are you calling it?
Well, I like, you know what a board slide is in a skateboard?
Yeah,
I
like
did that on a car, but on a Jersey barrier.
Jersey curb.
Yeah,
Okay.
it wasn't a good move. That was a crash.
What were you thinking when that was happening?
Well, you know, I misjudged what the front car was gonna do in front of me, and my front wheel hit and it just sucked me right up on the wall.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
And then the boys reshelled the car in like 2 weeks.
Pretty cool that the rubber stays rubbery.
Yeah.
It's good materials.
It's pretty cool compared to some other engines how simple the 2J is.
Yeah.
There's not a whole lot going on.
No, it's for the amount of effort that goes in, the reward that comes out is big. They're good engines. That's weird. This is pretty cool. The guy that put the engine together before, he took an extra minute and he put a radius on the oil inlet. So when this is cast, there's an intersection like this in the oil pickup, and someone took the time to take like a head porting tool and a die grinder, just go through there and smooth that out, make it a nice little round radius. Yeah, it's the little things.
So full disclaimer, we have done bearings on this once. Mid-season, Freddie did it kind of as a preventative maintenance, or was it really needed?
We found some metal in the oil, which was from the camshaft, and then I took a look at one of the rod bearings in there somewhere. So we put a set of bearings in it and we loosened up the tolerances a little bit.
What's the consensus, Doctor?
It's not in trouble. It's not gonna be perfect, but if you look at like, this is where it's trying to pull the piston back down the bore.
Got it.
You know, so there's like reverse load on it. So you take that coating off a little bit, but the main thing you want to look at is something like this, like has the bearing changed shape? Because that's a failure point. So when you put the bearing back in the shell, is it pretty tight? If it falls in, that means that it's widened the bearing here, it's flattened it out, which generally happens on the upper bearing because that's what sees all the combustion force.
Got it.
You guys are changing the oil a lot.
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest single thing that you could be doing because you don't have a lot of oil, but you have a lot of RPM.
Yeah.
So your oil's getting beat up quick and you're changing it often. And you also have a direct oiling crank. Like once we get the main caps off and we get to look at the crank, you'll see that the oil comes right from the main to the rod. It doesn't have to deal with an intersection. The oil gets basically trapped in the crank.
Is she bent or is she good?
Still round.
All right.
Yeah.
That was like the one point that we were worried about just from the power and torque, that maybe there'd be some slight bendage there. So you're just feeling that it's round by spinning it?
Yeah, because if it's not round, it's gonna stick.
Yeah.
So the problem with tool steel, it's tougher, but if it bends, it stays bent. When you get a pin like the BME C300 or a trend pin, they overheat treat it, and then it's got like some memory to where it'll flex, but it goes back to its home. Whereas a tool steel pin, once it's bent, and it doesn't get better, it gets worse.
So we're running CP pistons on this engine, BC rods. These are I-beam, which I learned is kind of interesting that we don't have to clearance for the 3.4, where like the H-beams you have to clearance, otherwise they'll hit the block. But what compression was this engine? Was this 10 to 1?
Yeah,
10 to
that's
1.
a 10 to 1 for a 3.4.
You can tell just by looking at it?
Yeah, because there's not, well,
You've seen enough?
this is the common piston for
Got
this
it.
combination. This is heavy forging. Like this is a strong part. These
Yeah.
are both very strong parts. You could take these parts and put them in drag racing and you could succeed. You know, as long as you can keep the oiling intact and the bearing alive, this part will live through anything.
Like what power? Like
2000.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, this, I've gone
Yeah,
very
really?
fast
You
with
heard
this.
that, Freddie?
This piston, you know, you'd want to go with an upgraded pin, you know, a further upgrade, but you're not going to break that rod. It's not going to happen.
All right.
Yeah, it's
More
when you see
nitrous.
a broken rod on the internet and people say like my rod broke and this is discolored. Well, it lost the bearing.
And then that's what
Yeah,
resulted, rod
it's-
knock, and then
yeah.
it breaks it, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, Jay, what'd you find?
All right. So we got two pistons out, and the number one cylinder caught my eye when I looked at the bores as we were taking the head off, and Adam was finishing up the reluctor.
Hey, relax.
I know, I got to dig where I can. Well, look at the gap on this ring, and it's got some spring to it. Well, the number one cylinder, the ring is relaxed, so the gap is smaller, and the ring acts as a spring. You collapse or compress the ring to slide it down into the bore, and then it springs back and it pushes itself against the bore. And if you overheat a ring, it will lose some of that spring, and that ring, when you feel it with your fingertips, it's squishy and the gap is smaller. So that ring is a bit relaxed, and that bore looked a bit worse. 1 and 6 are kind of troublemakers on a JZ. So you make concessions in the tune-up to try to control them.
Is that just because they get more air and less fuel, or?
Well, so you could argue that this one has less coolant because you're
Okay.
further away from the pump. You know, long engine has its fair share of things. And then how the plenum feeds number one.
Makes sense.
Yeah. In a perfect world, each cylinder would act independently, right? But they've got these common plenums and common exhaust and common cooling systems, so you have to deal with some stuff.
So did we catch it early enough where it could just be like a re-ring and a light hone, or is the grooves too deep in the cylinder to where we got to step up?
Well, that's a good question. A light hone will almost never get an engine back to round
Got it.
and straight. Scratches, while they matter, they mean less than if the cylinder is egg-shaped.
Got it.
You want a round cylinder.
That makes
so
sense.
the cosmetics of the cylinder that we get to see with our eyes are a component, but the main thing is like, is the bore round or is it ballooned down in the center? Like when we flip the engine over and we start looking at the bores, you can see that there's some movement in the bores.
Got it.
And that matters more. When we look at your bores, you'll see all the corrosion from the alcohol fuel. And it's not great, but it is how things go with alcohol-based fuel. But that's not as much of a problem as the shape changes in the bores. In the old days, rings were the thing that suffered the brunt of the wear. You would use like a cast or a molly-faced ring. It was soft. It wouldn't take much off the cylinder. It was fine. But you start pouring boost and heat into something, those rings give up quick.
Got it.
So this is not a bad ring in the sense of it as a part number, but it has its limitations in use, that's all.
Yeah, I mean, you know, too, like there's been situations where this engine's seen 230 plus, whether it was just 2 back-to-back runs with heavy load, or maybe when we were running into the water issue, like maybe there was an air pocket and that's what overheated the ring. If we kept running the engine at its current configuration with the ring being worn and losing its spring, what would happen? Would it eventually rod knock because it would be moving around too much? Or?
No, you'd get into less ring seal, more oil contamination. The oil doesn't have good octane. The engine starts to detonate and it will burn the cylinder up because of the oil contamination.
Got it.
If you treated the bores better, like you were religious with fogging the engine after every round and making sure the bores were lubricated and you keep the corrosion at bay, it would last a little bit longer. But that's not really the game you're playing. I mean, this is a racing engine.
Yep.
You know, you're using it and it's gonna have casualty, you know? See, that one was looser than this one. You hear the pop. So as you work the engine, the main saddle can relax. And then the cap, if the cap was fitted correctly when it went on, then the material actually relaxes and it will let the cap kind of fall out of place. So that one's not that tight. That one's tighter. That one's tighter. That one's tight. That one's tight. So these 2 caps, the register, either the cap has been narrowed too much, because when you fit these caps, they don't come for every block, so you can reduce the thickness here and here to make the cap narrower, because every main saddle can be a little bit different. But if you like look at this cap, see the face of this cap is pretty consistent looking. There's not like fretting where this thing's dancing around. So this cap doesn't have a problem. As we move through the engine, you may get one that has like dark spots down in here, and that's the cap grinding itself around through vibration on the block. So see that little dark spot? That's this thing, you know, exaggerated, but it dances. So what I was mentioning before with the crankshaft is that's direct oiling, so the oil can come right from the main, right to the rod in a straight shot. This is a Brian Crowder lightweight crank. So throughout this crankshaft, there's a lot of material removed from the counterweights, and then these are, the crankshaft is rifle drilled. So it's drilled all through the center of the crankshaft to lighten weight. It's pocketed back here behind the rod journal. So this is a pretty premium part. I think Brian told me once that it takes 7 or 8 hours of machine time to take a standard weight crank and make it a lightweight crank. Pretty awesome to have access. And if you buy one of these crankshafts and you get a set of mics out and you measure each journal, like, they just nail it on tolerance. They really do a good job at BC. You're gonna have viewers that ask about bearing clearance, and you know that you have an engine that lives well. And we have 2.5 thousandths of vertical oil clearance. And what I was telling you earlier, what I did there was I measured the crank and I know how big the crank is. That's on an outside mic. Then I take my inside mic and I make it 0 when it's in the inside mic. Now when I put it in here, the difference between the crankshaft and the bearing is that right there. It's 2.5 thousandths of an inch of vertical clearance. And then if you go near the parting line, see how the number opens up, it gets bigger because there's a certain amount of eccentricity that it's wider in the middle at the parting line than it is in the vertical. But if you put an engine together, like pick a piston engine that doesn't move around a lot, a cast iron block, and you have 2 to 2.5 thousandths oil clearance, like it's fine. You don't have to like pound your head at night of like, what's the right number? You get in a high horsepower engine with a tight clearance where parts are moving, you can touch a bearing down. You get into some odd thing like an old Ferrari that grows 3 thousandths with temp. You start off at 1 to end up at 4. But these are simple engines, so 2.5 through the mains is fine. Like this is a good living engine. This is a lot of the success of the engine. So yes, the guy that put it together did his job, and then you guys did your job, and you got to have a lot of fun with an engine. You could take this engine, hone the bores straight, have the pistons coated with line-to-line coating to make up some clearance, new set of bearings, new set of rings, get everything clean, 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 put it back together, and you got a good spare.
So the consensus is we can reuse this engine.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. You should name this engine.
Yeah.
That'll add like another 4 or 5 events to it if you give it a good name.
All right, you guys need to help us. So comment in the description something. Why do I always say that? You notice?
The description.
Yeah, that's like a thing lately.
Comment below.
Yeah, comment below what you guys think we should name this engine. She's gonna live on, probably as a spare, but we'll give her a name. If you enjoyed this video, I highly suggest going over to Jay's channel, RS Garage, checking it out. He's gonna be doing a build on our new motor for next year, and he's gonna document the process. just like this of taking it apart, but except building it and a lot of the intricacies that go into it. So thank you, Jay. I appreciate you coming over and sharing all your knowledge with us.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me. This is a much different world than I'm used to, and to see you guys having fun, and like when you were talking about what it's like to go into that corner, like giving the chills, because I know you're having fun, but I don't get to experience it, so it's exciting to see it through your lens.
Well, I appreciate it. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. We'll see you soon. No, it broke.
Yeah, I'm saying like the thing.
You already set me up to fail on that. Bill's the same guy that did the heads on the Porsche, so 2JZ. Oh, he beat me. Man. We're not gonna be able to hear you, so talk really loud because it's on the live's on me.